political spectrum are right to be asking the question, why should Putin's actions matter to the United States? Why should we care? Why can't we just be indifferent to Ukraine? What's our rooting interest against Putin? Some are asking this question in good faith. Others are asking this cynically to try to land cheap political points. Those advocating for indifference want us to believe that no vital American interests are at stake in this conflict. Those voices are wrong. Indifference is not an option here. Whether you're an optimistic idealist or a hardened realist, Americans shouldn't be indifferent.
See, he's right, and that proves Bobby Bowden right as well. If you saw that coffee cup behind him, Bowden was right. That N, it stands for knowledge. Senator Ben Sasse last week explaining why Americans should care about what's happening.
Of course.
In Ukraine, and the Nebraska Republican joins us now. Actually, Bobby Bowden said he went up to a huge Nebraska player before the first time they played him and said, "Son, what's that N on your helmet stand for?" He goes, "Knowledge, sir." And Bobby said, "That's when I knew we were sunk." So Senator, thank you for being with us. I wanted to just kind of get your feel for the people you represent. I think most Republicans have been responsible on Russia, even while Donald Trump was saying crazy things during his presidency. The Senate, one tough sanction after another. I'm just concerned as an American about the base. Are they hearing a lot of this nonsense about Putin and Ukraine, and it doesn't matter who wins or loses? And are you finding some of your constituents are actually buying into that? Or is the base still sort of the Republican Party of Ronald Reagan and Gene Kirkpatrick and Margaret Thatcher?
It's a fair question. Obviously, Joe, most Americans aren't paying attention to global affairs most of the time, and that's not a disparagement. They've got to be raising kids and putting bread on the table. So I'm pretty sure if we polled it, a majority of Americans wouldn't be able to find Ukraine on a map. And when they're passively not attentive to it, that's all right. It's in a moment of crisis, how do they respond? And obviously there are a bunch of clickbait voices that want to exacerbate isolationism. I don't like to give oxygen to clickbait because it gives oxygen to clickbait. But I think ultimately Americans are going to make a wise and smart choice about understanding why our rooting interest here should be against the evil Vladimir Putin, because the guy's got big ass weapons and he's evil. You could think he's a genius and evil, or you could think he's a madman and evil. But the reality is he has a lot of weapons and he has a lot of will, and so we have to care.
So I want to read you what the Wall Street Journal editorial board wrote this morning. Some Americans will want to concede Russia this sphere of influence and say it's Europe's problem. But a world in which Russia dominates Eastern and Central Europe, Iran dominates the Middle East, and China dominates East Asia will not be safe for U.S. interests. Regional powers have a habit of becoming global threats, especially when they work in concert, as Russia, China, and Iran are already doing. Obviously, those three countries are a grave threat to global stability and to future problems. What do we do now? I know you weren't pleased with the first round of sanctions. I think a lot of us thought they didn't go far enough. I'm curious, do you think the second round of sanctions are moving in the right direction? And then second part of my question is, how do we get Europe to move along further on oil and gas, and how do we get them to move along further on tougher sanctions for banking?
Yeah, great question. And let's talk about the to-do list because it's long, but potentially if you have time for it, let's come back to the China-Russia alliance because it matters a lot. But what we should do right now is, first of all, the intelligence community did a good job of getting intel out faster than they usually do to help deny Putin the pretextual cover for what he was going to try to do. Ukraine isn't a threat to Russia. Putin's a liar. He lies all the time, but he usually gets away with it. And the U.S. intelligence community helped thwart that this time. We need to keep that up, and we need to get tactical, actionable intelligence to the Ukrainians on the ground so they can kill the Russian invaders. Number two, we need to be arming them to the teeth. So President Biden should be coming to the Congress right now asking for an emergency supplemental for defense spending. The administration cut defense spending last year. It was a bad idea then. This isn't the time for recriminations. The question is, what do we need to do now? We're not going to put boots on the ground in Ukraine. We shouldn't. We don't need to. They're willing to fight, but we need to arm them. Number three, to your sanctions point, we need to do more sanctions. We need to do them faster. There's no reason to hold the SWIFT sanctions in reserve. That should have happened yesterday. It should happen today. We need to get it done. But fundamentally, we need to have targeted sanctions at the 16 oligarchs, the mobster cronies who enable Putin's madness. These guys, we need a made-for-TV lifestyles of the rich and famous assholes for the American people and people around the world to understand who these guys are. We need Germany to step up on energy sanctions. There should be no Nord Stream 2 ever. But frankly, we need the Brits, who have been great allies in general, we need them to step up and acknowledge that there's a ton of Russian billionaire money bouncing all over London, and we ought to perp walk those people out of the country. Their kids ought to be kicked out of the schools that they're in London, and they should go back and live in Moscow's hellholes with Putin, because they're the ones enabling him. They don't want to live with him, but they love to make money off them. And there need to be more consequences for them, and we need to act faster.
Well, that's